History of the Florinite and Akakian consecrations. Archimandrite Akakios, while in the Matthewites, sent a letter sent to Bishop Matthew sometime in 1945, signed by the then Archimandrite Akakios, Archimandrite Artemios, and Father Evgenios Tombros, pleading with Bishop Matthew to consecrate bishops and form a synod. Not only Acacius Pappus the Elder, but also Acacius Pappus the Younger were Matthewites. Akakios Pappus was an Archimandrite of the Matthewite synod. When he made this petition to Bishop Matthew to ordain bishops, Bishop Matthew was alone in 1945. It was in 1945 that they began searching for bishops outside Greece, but could not find any that would help in consecrations. Bishop Matthew was all alone. Despite this, Akakios Pappus begged for Bishop Matthew to consecrate bishops, and for him to be one of those bishops. Bishop Matthew refused to do so until he searched longer. Only in 1948, when he realized that he was about to die, Bishop Matthew consecrated a bishop alone. This was an act of economy. Akakios Pappus, on the other hand, had already been deposed by Bishop Matthew, and Akakios Pappus had been received into the Florinite jurisdiction by the end of 1945. Akakios Pappus himself, while a Matthewite, begged Bishop Matthew to consecrate bishops alone. Why was this not a problem for Akakios? Yet, after he was deposed in 1945, he went to Chrysostom of Florina, and he begged Chrysostom of Florina to consecrate him. Again, Akakios was rejected by Chrysostom, and Chrysostom died without consecrating successors, even though he could have if he wanted to. When Akakios went to America to receive a false, ineffective consecration, he did so because he wanted himself, though deposed, to receive the dignity of bishop, not because he was concerned for the holy struggle. Akakios left Matthew after 1948, perhaps because he was not the one chosen to be consecrated. He left using the argument that the single-handed consecration in 1948 by Bishop Matthew was not acceptable to him. Meanwhile, 3 years earlier was asking Bishop Matthew to go ahead with consecrations. Bishop Matthew was as alone in 1945 as he was in 1948. Why was okay to consecrate alone in 1945, but was not okay in 1948? Here is the relevant information from my article. In the following passage, you will see that not only Acacius Pappus the Elder, but also Acacius Pappus the Younger, were Matthewites. The article I am referring to is from the 1981 volume of Kyrix, and the original document is kept at the headquarters of the Matthewite Synod. Now, this is the relevant text from my article. On October 10, 23rd, 1937, a council took place in Athens at which the two truly believing hierarchs and the senior clergy with them officially declared that the Florinites, by their blasphemous statements against the Holy Spirit, have fallen from the true confession of the orthodox faith. It was again confirmed at the council that the mysteries of the new calendarists, as well as the chrism of the ecumenical patriarchate that was blessed after 1924, are devoid of illuminating and sanctifying grace. The council's decisions were signed by ex-Metropolitan Germanus of the Cyclades, ex-Metropolitan Matthew of Brestina, ex-Archimandrite Hieronymus, Confessor, ex-Archimandrite Gideon, Prohegomen, ex-Archimandrite Acacius Pappus, ex-Archimandrite Artemius of Xenophon, ex-Archimandrite Ioannichius Ioannidis, ex-Archimandrite Polycarp Cucopaulus, ex-Archimandrite Hilarion Usunopaulus, ex-Hieromonk Gerasimus of Dionysiu, ex-Hieromonk Ignatios Petarakis, ex-Hieromonk Sabas Confessor, ex-Hieromonk Anthony of Neoskyta, ex-Hieromonk Christopher Poulopatis, ex-Hieromonk Christopher Chronopaulus, ex-Hieromonk Longinus, ex-Hieromonk Nectarius, ex-Hieromonk Joseph Antonio, new martyr, ex-priest Demetrius Jokas, ex-priest Christos Jokas, ex-Hierodeacon Christodulus, ex-Hierommonk Gregory, ex-elder Victor, monk, ex-Anthony Vernalicus, monk, ex-Archimandrite Neophytus Cathagumen, ex-Stephen, monk, ex-Athanasius Valsamachus, monk, ex-Stephen Macris, monk, ex-Acacius Pappus, monk, ex-Mark, monk. There are several problems with the Florinite consecrations. First, the fact that a Greek hierarchy already existed. Second, the very basis of them, the supposed need for, or Florinite bishops, is very questionable. Third, the new bishops were very dubious candidates for consecration. Fourth, the manner in which the consecrations were carried out was a travesty. A closer look at these problems follows. 1. A Greek hierarchy already existed. We may argue about which hierarchy, the new calendarist or the Matthewite, was the canonical hierarchy of Greece, but there's no denying that one of them must have been. First, consider the question of the Matthewite hierarchy. Archbishop Matthias made use of a single-handed consecration in 1948 to perpetuate the Greek episcopate. This can only be justified by the fact that he was the last free bishop of the Church of Greece, and no other bishop was able to participate. Thus, the Matthewites presuppose that neither the new calendarist nor the Florinite bishops were, as of 1948, the canonical bishops of Greece. If this is not true, the Matthewite consecrations must be considered uncanonical, and we must look elsewhere to see if we can find any Greek hierarchy. But if it's true, then the economia exercised by Blessed Archbishop Matthäus was justified, and the Matthewite hierarchy is the canonical episcopate of Greece. A. Was the new calendarist hierarchy the canonical hierarchy of Greece? No. In 1924, they had fallen under multiple anathemas, and in 1935, the true Orthodox Church of Greece had officially declared that these anathemas were in force and effective in the case of the Greek New Calendarist schism. B. Was the Florinite hierarchy, independently of both the New Calendarists and the Matthewites, the canonical hierarchy of Greece? No, not according to the Florinite bishops themselves, and not by any reasonable standard. In 1948, the Florinite synod consisted of Chrysostomos Kavurides, Christophoros Hatzi, and Polycarpos Leosi. Metropolitan Chrysostomos had declared in 1944, the same year that the other two left the New Calendarists, that he would never consecrate another bishop, seeing that his parataxis, not church, was really a protest movement within the state Church of Greece, and he did not want to perpetuate an opposition hierarchy. It's plain that Metropolitan Chrysostomos could hardly have been the leader of the Church of Greece at a time when he himself acknowledged the New Calendarist schism as the Church of Greece. The Florinite position at that time was that a pan-orthodox synod would have to resolve the calendar question. This, you will notice, is the position of the Cyprianate synod to this day. The Cyprianites alone among all the Florinites represent the historic Florinite position. Of course, the question had already been resolved by several pan-orthodox synods as early as 1583. Now, in late 1949, after the Matthewite Consecrations, Metropolitan Chrysostomos did issue a pastoral letter saying that the New Calendarists were schismatics. This encouraged Metropolitan Germanos of the Cyclades, who objected to both the Matthewite consecrations and to the false Florinite ecclesiology, and he joined the Florinites when he was set free in 1950. A few months later, the Florinites issued an encyclical reaffirming the encyclical of 1935 and retracting all their statements to the contrary. Was this a sincere return to the Orthodox teaching? Who knows? The Cyprianites maintained that it was not, and that it was issued in an attempt to unify the Old Calendar movement. It is interesting that it was issued 12 days after the blessed repose of Archbishop Matthäus, and personally, I'm inclined to accept the Cyprianate view on it. It was intended to draw the Matthewites into the Florinite parataxis, but did not represent any true change in convictions. I think several things support this conclusion. Despite the fact that there were 4 Florinite bishops at liberty for a period of 13 months, they did not consecrate any new bishops. In 1952, after Metropolitan Germanos had passed away and Metropolitan Chrysostomos had returned from a 17-month period in exile, the surviving Florinite bishops still did not proceed to consecrate any new bishops. 3. In 1952, Metropolitan Chrysostomos declared that they had said the New Calendarists were schismatic, only to defend themselves against the New Calendarist accusations. 4th, in 1952, all 3 of the Florinite bishops resigned from the episcopate. Metropolitan Chrysostomos had always styled himself only the former Metropolitan of Florina anyway. They stated that they would await a final resolution of the calendar question by a pan-orthodox synod, thus effectively returning to Metropolitan Chrysostomos' long-standing errors. Due to protests from their followers, Metropolitan Chrysostomos did agree to return to the office of bishop for his parataxis, but the other 2 did not, and remained as laymen in the group. This is clear proof that they did not consider the Florinite parataxis the Church of Greece, for 2 of the only 3 Orthodox bishops in the country to have abandoned their office would have been inexcusable. V. In 1954, Christophoros Hatzi and Polycarpos Leosi returned to the New Calendarist schism, where they were received as bishops. There is no evidence that Metropolitan Chrysostomos ever attempted at any time to retract his promise of 1944 and consecrate any new bishops. In the decades since, many Florinite apologists, apart from the Cyprianites, have attempted to redefine the Florinite parataxis as the Church of Greece. It must be noted, however, that except for a 1 brief period and 2 very unconvincing statements, the consistent position of Metropolitan Chrysostomos from 1937 until his death in 1955 was that the New Calendarist schism was the Church of Greece, and that he and his followers constituted only a movement. This consciousness still pervades the Florinite jurisdictions. They all, without exception, even those who claim to now represent the canonical Church of Greece, speak of the Old Calendar movement. They all, except perhaps for Hokna and the followers of Akakios the Younger, continue to commune New Calendarists, though not in all places. Thus, the Kalinikites commune New Calendarists in Australia, but not in the USA. The Kiosites commune New Calendarists, as far as I know, only in the USA. The idea that the Florinites constitute a church, and not merely movement, is an innovation dating from the time of Auxentios Pastras. Now, at least 3 of the Florinite jurisdictions now claim to accept the encyclical of 1935, placing the New Calendarists outside the church. But if the encyclical of 1935 is true, then it must be admitted that the Florinites were in error in 1937 and thereafter. Upon repudiating this error, it was incumbent upon them to reunite with the Matthewites, who had been faithful all along. Plainly, this puts the Florinites in an uncomfortable position. I have seen 4 explanations for this failure to return to the true Church of Greece. They were unable to accept the uncanonical consecrations of the matthewite bishops. This is, not to mince words, an obvious lie. We have already seen the means by which the Florinites obtained their own bishops. The teaching of Metropolitan Chrysostomus from 1937 was true and orthodox. It is possible to wall oneself off from canonical orthodox bishops who have fallen into error but are still orthodox bishops. This is an unheard of innovation, and Bishop Gregory, Grab, and others have ably refuted it, so I won't address it here. The other Florinite synods rightly condemn this teaching, now called the Cyprianity teaching, as heretical, oblivious to the fact that if it is a heresy, the Florinites fell into heresy in 1937. Metropolitan Chrysostomos was in error from 1937 to 1950, but it was not a serious error, and therefore the Matthewites were wrong to sever communion with him. But why, if it was not a serious error, do they claim to accept the encyclical of 1935, rather than just maintaining silence on the matter? And why do they condemn as heretics the Cyprianites, who have remained faithful to Metropolitan Chrysostomos' errors? For the new calendar is not in itself a matter of faith, and the new calendarists only fell into heresy in 1965, when Patriarch Athenagoras lifted the anathemas against Rome. This view is openly taught in the USA by at least some priests of both Hokana and the Kalinikit Synod. But if this is true, the new calendarist schism must be considered the canonical Church of Greece from 1924 to 1965, and both the Matthewites and the Florinites are merely schismatic bodies. So, despite several creative attempts by some Florinites to redefine themselves, I can't see any logical reason for believing that any Florinite group has ever constituted the Church of Greece, with or without a hierarchy. The canonical episcopate in 1960 to 63 was either the new calendarist or the Matthewite episcopate, and either the new calendarist schism or the true Orthodox Church of Greece was in fact the canonical Church of Greece. The Church of Greece was not widowed, and therefore the Russian bishops had no authority, whether acting on their own or synodically, to consecrate a new hierarchy for Greece. 2. Obviously, if there was a hierarchy in place, we must ask why the Florinites needed bishops in 1960 to 63. They needed bishops, plainly, to perpetuate their parataxis. Unfortunately, there's no reason to believe that this desire was consistent with orthodoxy. The only logical explanation is the heretical explanation given by the Cyprianites about walling themselves off from true bishops. 3. Who were the 7 Florinite bishops consecrated in the early 1960s? We remember, of course, that Bishop Petros was not actually a Florinite at time of his consecration. At least 2 of them were defrocked Matthewite priests. One was a priest of the Moscow Patriarchate at the time of his consecration. One was a nephew of their leader. One later disgraced himself with his outrageous and irresponsible acts, bringing confusion and divisions upon the Florinites that persist to this day. Akakios, Papas, and Petros, Astifides, were not elected with the participation of any bishop. Metropolitan Petros was elected by a clergy conference of 11 priests, at which no bishop was present in 1956. He later joined the American Metropolia, which declined to consecrate him, and the Moscow Patriarchate, which might have if he had not secured the cooperation of Archbishop Leonti first. In essence, he requested consecration for himself. The same is true of Akakios Papas, whose last bishop, Metropolitan Chrysostomos, had declined to consecrate him or anyone to perpetuate the Florinite hierarchy. Akakios Papas, like Petros Astifides, was elected without the participation of any bishop. In his case, it was a clergy laity conference that elected him in 1957. Also elected at the same conference were Chrysostomos Kiousis and Chrysostomos Naslimes. Did this clergy laity conference have any canonical authority? If so, we have to ask why Akakios the Younger and other candidates were consecrated long before Chrysostomos Kiousis, who wasn't consecrated until 1971. Of course, if the clergy laity conference didn't have any canonical authority, the election of Akakios the Elder is meaningless. In any case, we see that Akakios the Elder was in no hurry to act on the election of Chrysostomos Kiousis, which obviously had the same validity as his own. Later, Archbishop Auxentios would become legendary for his inappropriate consecrations of questionable characters. But now, at the very beginning of the restored Florinite hierarchy, there is something disquieting about their bishops, and we have to wonder whether the bishops consecrated in the early 1960s were really the best candidates. Certainly, the opinion of their own clergy laity council was that there was at least one candidate preferable to 5 of these 7. Already in 1960, with the consecration of a defrocked priest at his own request, we have the seeds of the later disorders which characterize the Florinites to this day. 4. The Church of Greece objects to the manner in which the Florinite consecrations were carried out. The manner in which the Florinites obtained their hierarchy was dishonorable, being characterized by lies, deceptions, and disobedience. In addition, it was uncanonical for at least the following reasons. A. The consecrations were done in secret. B. No consecration certificates were issued. The consecrations were simply claimed without any corroborating evidence. When the details became known, of course, it made things even worse. C. The rocor bishops acted in direct defiance of their own metropolitan and synod, and lied about their participation afterwards. D. With one exception, the rocor bishops acted outside their own dioceses. E. The persistent allegations that Bishop Theophil was paid for his participation have never been adequately investigated. F. Bishop Theophil was himself a new calendarist. G. In one case, the rocor bishops secretly consecrated a bishop within the very diocese of their own metropolitan, who, along with his synod, opposed the consecration. H. In every other case, they consecrate bishops for the canonical territory of the Church of Greece. Thus, they exceeded not only their own authority, which they had already exceeded by defying the decision of their own synod, but even the authority of their synod. In summary, there was no canonical or logical basis at all for the re-establishment of the Florinite hierarchy, unless the Cyprianity heresy is accepted. Indeed, this heresy could just as accurately be called Florinite, but for the fact that most Florinites now reject it, even though it provides the basis for their existence. In fact, of all the Greek Old Calendarists, only the Cyprianites and the Matthewites are able to present any reasonable explanation for their own existence. The two positions are, to say the least, mutually exclusive, and we maintain that the Cyprianity position is in fact heretical, but it provides the only basis for the restoration of the Florinite hierarchy. Stavros Markou quite logically refuses to refer to the restored Florinite hierarchy as Florinites at all, and calls them Akakians instead. This stresses the facts that the original Florinite hierarchy ceased to exist by its own design, that the present Florinite hierarchy is an entirely different one, and that the present Florinite bishops have no continuity with the historic episcopate of the Church of Greece, no apostolic succession from the ecumenical patriarch. The Akakian consecrations, however, were performed in violation of several canons, and this was done without the use of economy, because there was no persecution or lack of communication at the time of the Akakian consecrations. Never has such lineage as that of the Akakians ever been accepted as valid in the history of the Orthodox Church. Such bishops were always immediately deposed. In one of Father Philotheos Tamparis' books, there is proof of how much money Akakios took with him to America. The Florinite priest, for Gregory Papavlakos, reveals many freaky things that went on at that time. For Gregory Papavlakos, who accompanied Akakios to the US, said that before leaving, Akakios took 200,000 drachmas, which at that time is a lot of money. Furthermore, this money was taken from the Philopotokos of the Florinite Church, without the knowledge of the Philoptokos. For Gregory Papavlakos then goes on to say that after the Russian Synod rejected Akakios, he went to Archbishop Seraphim of Chicago and offered him all his money and everything he had. Kai ta panta are the words for Gregory Papavlakos uses in Greek. Archbishop Seraphim agreed, but needed another bishop to collaborate. Bishop Theophilus Ioannescu agreed to collaborate, but only on two conditions. 1. Akakios must give an oath on the Holy Bible that his soul will be taken by the devil, and he will have the curse, katara, of the Holy Trinity if he told anyone about who ordained him. 2. No ordination certificate will be given to Akakios. Akakios then replied that, for the sake of our holy struggle, oh, give us a break, we will accept these conditions. Akakios Papas then said that he would give the money to Archbishop Seraphim straight after the ordination. For Gregory Papavlakos then goes on to say that for Petros Astafidis, later Bishop Petros of Astoria, took a photo of the moment that Akakios gave his oath on the Holy Bible. All of the above is revealed by the Florinite priest for Gregory Papavlakos, who accompanied Akakios Papas whitherto he went and was an eyewitness to all of the above-mentioned events. Letter of the late ABP, Seraphim of Chicago to ABP, Auxentios, 1972, *****, Diocese of Chicago and Detroit Inc., Head Office, Vladimir over Lost Lake, Rock City, IL 61070, Subsidiary 2135, North Sawyer Street, Chicago, IL 60647 MH 312-384-1973, the 26th of October 1972, NC, Memory of St. Demetrius the Mirror Gusher. The Archbishop, Auxentius, dear brother and concelebrant in Christ, because recently discussions are again arising concerning the ordination of the late Akakios Papas, and as there is mention of my name, I would like to make the following points. Bishop Akakios was ordained bishop by my unworthiness, and the Romanian Bishop Theophilus. I did not ordain Bishop Akakios alone. The ordination took place in Detroit, Michigan, and in the Cathedral Church of Bishop Theophilus. There are eyewitnesses who are still alive who were present during the ordination, that is, the then archimandrites, now bishops Akakios and Peter. Therefore, the ordination certificate, which bears my signature, is accurate as far as it mentions that mine unworthiness and another bishop performed the ordination. The second bishop is not mentioned and did not sign the ordination certificate because both Bishop Theophilus and Bishop Akakios, for personal reasons, did not publicly make known the incident. As far as my participation is concerned, I explained to the then candidate archimandrite Akakios that owing to the prohibition of his being ordained by my synod, that Bishop Theophilus would assist so that there be a second bishop present for the ordination. I explained to all who were interested that Bishop Theophilus followed the new calendar ***, even though there existed a few communities adhering to the old calendar under his jurisdiction. The Cathedral Church in Detroit celebrates with the new calendar. I did not hide this fact from Bishop Akakios. His reply was that there was an extremely urgent need for a bishop for Greece, and that he had to return as bishop, thus consenting to Bishop Theophilus' participation in the ordination. He would overlook the fact that he celebrated with the new calendar. If Bishop Theophilus now denies his participation in the ordination, he himself bears the responsibility. I cannot place his signature in the ordination certificate. Bishop Akakios accepted the ordination, knowing well back then that Bishop Theophilus was not going to sign any certificate whatsoever. The responsibility, therefore, for the present confusion rests with the late Bishop Akakios and those with him. Now, with the written denial of Bishop Theophilus that he did not take part in the ordination, the situation becomes complicated, and a canonical issue concerning the ordination is created. I'm truly sorry for this, but who would have foreseen or imagined the present development of the whole matter? Dear brother, is it possible that God in his righteousness has allowed this temptation because your jurisdiction has repeatedly and excessively used the incident of the ordination of a bishop by a single bishop as argumentation against the jurisdiction of Archbishop Matthew? If humility and compassion had been shown towards those that were ordained by a single bishop, and if the decision of our synod concerning them had received acceptance, then probably this temptation would not have come upon you. Our Metropolitan Philaret from the outset, and even prior to last year's appearance before our synod of the bishops from the jurisdiction of Matthew, wrote repeatedly towards your reverence, saying that we are convinced that the so much desired union between the two jurisdictions would be achieved if you could confront the above-mentioned bishops with brotherly humility and if you address them as bishops. The motivations of our synod, dear brother, for the ties with our Greek brethren were always sincere and aimed towards the strengthening of orthodoxy during this turbulent age. That is why we are always hopeful that a way would be found so that the two jurisdictions of the genuine Orthodox Christians in Greece could unite. Towards this blessed aim, we do not spare toils or time, always encouraging and advising the two jurisdictions to unite. In your correspondence with our Holy Synod, we observe that you repeatedly throw the responsibility of no union on the other jurisdictions. However, allow me to make a few observations. Examining the documents from the Synod files concerning the matters in Greece, we have the encyclical of your reverence that was issued in Athens on the 27th of August, 1971, OC Protocol number 532, which amongst other things mentions the following. We declare with responsibility and categorically towards everyone that this issue, that is the union with the Matthewites, is considered by many as closed for many and different reasons. Note that this encyclical was written while the bishops Callistos and Epiphanios of the Matthewite jurisdiction were still to be found in the United States of America, giving a report on their situation before the Synod. The same sorrowful expression, that a union with the Matthewites is considered a closed case, is to be found printed in your official journal, even after the return of the above-mentioned bishops to Greece, and even after the publication of our Synod's decision concerning them. Our Far Basil Sakis from Geneva had commented on the issue and justly questions, from whom and when was the issue closed? Doesn't this indicate a manifest unwillingness and prejudice on your part, not even to merely accept the notion of the possibility to come to discussions with the Matthewites? And again, is it not a sign of unwillingness to unite with the other jurisdiction on your behalf, your ordination of the Bishop of Thessaloniki, where there already presides a bishop of the Matthewite jurisdiction for more than 20 years, in fact now, during a period of hopes for union? Does not this deed complicate the situation even more, and does it not reveal the unwillingness to unite on your part? But even more, it saddens us that you discard the verdict and resolution of our synod concerning the Matthewite bishops by writing in your official mouthpiece that they can rightfully be compared with those of the Meletian Schism of Alexandria. When our decisions are to your liking, then you take great joy and accept them. When they are disagreeable, then you discard them. But such behavior does not suit serious and maturely minded men, how much less for bishops. You call those of the Matthewite jurisdiction schismatics. But examining the event which led to the separation, we note that initially the Metropolitan of Florina, Chrysostom, and those with him declared the innovating church of the new calendarists as schismatic. As follows, the canons concerning schismatics were placed in effect. After a while, he changed views and declared that the danger of the calendar constitutes an irregularity of sorts and not the cause of schism. Following this, Bishop Matthew and those with him departed. In time, Bishop Matthew ordained alone bishops for bishoprics of Greece, always considering the official church as schismatic. A few months after the repose of Bishop Matthew, Bishop Chrysostom issued another official declaration where he considers the innovating church of the new calendarists of Greece as schismatic and as a consequence her mysteries being invalid. Thus, he who studies the aforementioned facts with objectivity concludes that, at least, the matthewite jurisdiction is ultimately justified since she never changed the view that she had initially formulated. On the contrary, the jurisdiction of the Bishop Chrysostom is the one that changed her initial stance, and after a 30-year period returned to that position which the matthewite jurisdiction had preserved from the outset. How then can the matthewites be declared schismatics? But again, irrespective of what has been said and what has occurred during the past, are not both of you now in agreement with regards to the official Church of Greece? With the lapse of 20 years and more since the time when Bishop Matthew ordained bishops for the Greek bishoprics, have you not recently stopped ordaining titular bishops and rather ordained bishops for the Greek bishoprics? Which points divide you today? Your jurisdiction has not shown seriousness or stability in her expositions and resolutions, even more so as if the divisions, accusations, and confusions that were provoked by your ordinations in Greece last year weren't enough. We observe that you have also transferred the same situation to this hemisphere through the ordination of Bishop Akakian the Younger in Montreal. Concerning this anti-canonical deed, both the Archbishop of Montreal Vitali and our synod have written to you, but unfortunately in vain. You realize, dear brother, that a single anti-canonical deed against one of our bishops is considered as such against all of our bishops, because it is a sin against the Church, and it cannot be considered a simple local issue. The present situation of events saddens all of us. Initially, when I took part in the ordination of the late Bishop Akakian, I did it in good faith, sincerely thinking that I was helping my Greek brethren. The same can be said about the motivations of our blessed Archbishop Leonti. The confusion, the divisions, the actions, accusations that have since arisen, I had never even suspected back then. Now I have come to appreciate and comprehend the fact that your Bishop Chrysostom reposed without leaving successors. The outcome of events indicates that he was a deep conversant of individuals and events, thus not desiring to be responsible for the present sorrowful predicament. I made a mistake ordaining the Bishop Akakian the Elder as regards to the fact that I did not know well the individuals or the real situation of events in the Greek Church. I do not write these things to shame you, dear brother, according to the word of the Apostle Paul towards the Corinthians, but I admonish you and offer the opportunity to reconsider certain opinions and that you correct those which need correction. With candor I write to you in such fashion, for I happen to be more responsible than anyone else for your line of ordinations, and thus admonish you not only as a brother, but also as a father. I take joy in the fact that even though many years have passed and I have advanced in age, I am still alive and able to write to you the above. Your brother in Christ, Seraphim, Archbishop of Chicago and Detroit. Letter of Archpriest George Grab to Bishop Akakian, to the Ecclesiastic Committee of the Clergymen of the Greek Church of Genuine Orthodox Christians. Dear Fathers, I have received your letter of September 15th, 1961, and reported its contents to His Eminence Metropolitan Anastasi, as well as to the Most Reverend Archbishops Seraphim and Vitali. I can therefore give you the following answers to your questions. 1. Archbishop Seraphim told me that he never wrote Father Akakian any letter with the contents you mention. Answering his letter, he wrote him only that he can't help him in any way at the present time. 2. No order of our synod has ever been issued in regard to the consecration of Father Akakian. On the contrary, Luce's plea for consecration was rejected by the synod. 3. The Most Reverend Archbishops Seraphim and Vitali have once more stated that they did not consecrate Father Akakian and therefore could not procure him with a certificate of ordination. 4. My son, Father Anthony Grab, is not a bishop but only an abbot, and he'll not suggest to any bishops the consecration of Father Akakian. Even if he would do so, it would be nothing more than a private opinion. 5. Our church never proclaimed the ecumenical patriarch or the Greek Archbishop of North and South America new schismatics and did not suspend spiritual contact with them. 6. Our church maintains the old calendar and regards the introduction of the new calendar as a big mistake. However, the policy has always been to maintain spiritual relationship with Orthodox churches, which have accepted the new calendar if they celebrate Easter according to the decision of the First Ecumenical Council. Very truly yours in Christ, Archpriest George Grab, Chancellor to the Synod of Bishops.